Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Kelly. I'm going to talk about a small isolated building in a big landscape. The site is a remote glacial valley in the South Island of New Zealand. Originally, the land was leased from the Crown for a high country station. High altitude sheep farming is always marginal business. At a recent tenure review by the government, all the steep mountain land above the tree line reverted to the conservation estate, and the valley floor was granted freehold title to the farmer, who promptly sold it to our client, a British hedge fund trader based in Singapore. I think land banking is the term used. The Ahuriri Valley counts as one of 7 major glacial valleys in the South Island. During the glacial retreat, 10,000 years ago, the river washed out the end of the terminal moraine, so the natural dam was eroded and the lake never formed. There are significant protected species wetlands in the upper reaches, and the Ahuriri is a famous trout fishing river. The vastness of this continuous alpine valley curving away into the distance causes us to pause. There are few spaces we encounter where we are suddenly 4 years old again. For me, this is one of them. As well as intensifying the sense of place, the vast scale of the valley recalibrates our spatial reading. The roaring 40s weather comes in over the top of the Southern Alps, dropping heavy rain and bringing severe gale force winds down the valley with an associated wind chill that can quickly bring on hypothermia. The temperature ranges from -16 in winter to 35 degrees plus in summer. This alpine scale, coupled with the quickly changing weather, reminds us how small and vulnerable we are when exposed in this remote location. An increased ecological awareness is needed for survival. Quite a topical subject. The built object in the landscape has long been a challenge for New Zealand architecture, particularly amongst beautiful scenic backdrops of Aotearoa. On this site, where architecture's neighbour is ecology and geology, rather than other buildings, how might we address the problem of the isolated building, as well as meet the brief for an upmarket 5-bed suite traveller's lodge, about 700 metres squared of footprint? As you can see, the scale of this storage shed for the farmer's grass airstrip is very hard to judge. From the 1750s on, at the end of the Baroque, there started to be a separation between architecture and landscape. Robert Morris was an 18th century surveyor and architectural theorist who argued strongly against landscape and architecture being separated. Morris, in his 1734 lectures on architecture, emphasised the reciprocal relationship between architecture and landscape is best expressed through their topological character. In our projects, architecture workshops always searched to discover a geometric response that derives from the larger landscape and a spatial response that amplifies the special qualities of the place. In the context of our thinking, the roof is the primary means of relating architecture to the site or situation, and we've always been intrigued by Peter Buchanan's essay in the AR that suggested people who have migrated by sea, such as those around the Pacific Rim, have developed as more lightweight tension cultures as opposed to heavier compression cultures of Europe. Referencing Gottfried Semper's framework, we put these light and heavy elements in opposition. For Peregrine, the light steel roof over the precast concrete wine cellar excavated into the ground provides an event stage that opens to the landscape. For Waitomo Caves, the radial geometry for the toroidal LVL grid shell structure is set from the curve of the stream. And now to our site. We are intrigued by the flows of the beautiful survey contours. In applying Robert Morris's ideas, the strategy is to bind the building with the land and to make the building an attribute of the site. For AW, responding to the strong topological context was a strategy where the architecture and the landscape could resemble each other more and reflect, we hope, the rising ecological consciousness of contemporary culture. The building is positioned on the riverbank edge, maintaining close views over the narrow river. And the land side, we retained the 2 natural bowls of the landscape, also providing entry. The building is excavated into land to keep a low profile from the weather and provide insulation. You can see here where the river has escaped to the side, and you can see the arrival gravel road along a contour, revealing the building bit by bit. The energy shed to the rear is buried in the ground, and landscape terrain behind is close and rolling, a bit like a blue water ocean view. This contrasts with the more panoramic and distant views up the valley. The precast structural walls align with the axis of the valley, and we used this offset from the vista geometry to form some sheltered sunny outdoor spaces in the lee of the predominant nor'wester wind. The detailed construction layers of the parametric roof contours are summarised by the axonomic diagram and are the result of an established close collaboration between architect and structural engineer. Steel frames being erected, they were fabricated SHS frames forming a constructed ground and set up from the mullions on the riverside facade. The timber structural plywood on timber purlins cut on two sides follows the curve of the surface. And interestingly, the lamella, here you can see the structural engineer, Alistair Catanack, proving to the builder that a 90 by 25 spotted gum hardwood section, which are 14 times stronger than our standard radiata pine, can be forced into shape by a human applied force of about 80 kilograms. A full-scale prototype was built, which led to the invention of screw laminated fabrication for the hardwood lamella, enabling a cost-effective on-site assembly for the Great Hall grid shell. This grid shell provides about 40% of the lateral restraint. I wanted to make the point that this is not a camouflage building. It is an unusual building in that the large roof only has two elevations. Each elevation has a different character that responds to the adjacent landscape. In the Lindis Lodge, the visitor experience is expressed differently on the land side and on the air side, and on the river side. This is shown by the section. You can see on the right, we have a 2.25 ceiling, black reflective ceiling continues to the outside. As you move to the bed suites, you'll see in a moment, you're taken into the rain. So it's a formal geometry at the back, and you enter from the bowls. And as you can see here from the bowl what the view is, you can see here from behind how it melds with the landscape. It's much more recessive. Where's the building? And you enter, you arrive along the back, it's sunk into the ground. That's going to the right, going to the left along the rear elevation. And you can see here how you circulate along the curve on the land side to the 3 bedrooms on the left. It's on the west side. You have a great hall and social spaces in the middle, and the 2 bed suites on the right side. Brings you to the bed suite with a direct view up the valley. You can see here looking back the wall that wraps you into the ground on your arrival. We've used wood both to make the building and to line the building, spotted gum, hardwood veneer. The black ceilings continue around the back, so there's a lower social zone that looks out to the other side. And on the riverside, we've got quite a different character. The building is more assertive, it claims the valley, the geometry is more willful on the edge of the roof. We worked to make them quite distinct. The contours of the roof reflect some of the glacial moraine. And here you can see we set out our mullions from parametric modelling. Our different layers are modelled all from this 1.5 metre grid. You can see the view from the air side up the valley, the riverside, and the roof, as it comes down and overshadows, creates environmental shading. The view from the big room, you can see the lamella grid shell going through the facade to the outside to anchor the building in the ground. We affectionately called that the funnel. Lower areas on the riverside that face up the valley. The terminal moraine with the building sitting in the front facing up the valley. A side shot showing how the lodge effectively forms a new ground, a constructed topography that adds a further fold within the continuity of the existing glacial moraine. The building wraps its guests in a protective cloak, and we hope heightens their capacity to appreciate and wonder the special landscape of the Ahuriri. Thank you.
Can you walk on the roof?
The council was very concerned that people would, and they made us plant these thorny plants along the edge to stop people walking on the roof. We're not as adventurous in the stairs as you are in Holland.
So the Australian topography was a curved geology with, no, the previous project had a curved geology with a faceted architecture, and yours is the opposite. You have faceted geology with a curved architecture, but they complement each other very nicely. Yeah.
We're quite opposite. We're in quite opposite environments.
I see, yeah.
I'm a little, can you talk about the relationship between the vertical and the horizontal architecture? It seems like you developed one language of concrete walls, then slathered with wood, and a glass wall, and then this parametric roof that drapes over it. The two don't seem to really have, did you really conceive of them as two separate systems?
The roof, the geometry of the roof from the parametric diagrams I showed layering up is set out from the riverside mullions. So it took us a long time to find the construction rigor of the building. And once we allowed the riverside mullions to space themselves differently and to line up with the structure of the roof, it really freed, we sort of discovered a construction logic. It's quite hard with this willful geometry to, to make it more logical. So we would argue that the riverside roof helps derive the whole structure of the roof. I guess when you do the parametric modelling, you have a number of options about the layers you can choose. You can see if you go back, I suppose I can do that. You can go back, you can see the different lines of force that we could use either for structure, or we could use it for lamellar grid shell, or I'll find, it's really this diagram here. So the blue lines are steel, the green lines become the lamella, and you can see how each of the riverside mullions join onto a node. So,
but my question wasn't structural, it was, if you can go back a few slides.
Sure.
No, the other way, or I guess forward, sorry, to the interior. You have one more there. You seem to have a language of stone-covered walls, concrete, I assume, covered with a stone veneer, and then glass with a tubular steel frame, and it seems to be of a very different sort than the roof.
Yes, I guess. We needed, in the main space, we needed a stone back to provide if you like, a psychological background to facing up the valley. So that material, and I guess also in our minds, when there's a fire in a homestead, the last thing standing is the chimney. We always thought this would make quite a good ruin. If the lodge burnt down, it's quite a long way from a fire station. The ruin that would remain would be the stone wall. I don't know how else to answer your question. Each of those elements are required to support the building.
Right. No, I understand that. There also seems to be, I sort of feel like there must be a lot hiding here. I mean, this is a small inn. Most hotels, I assume, even when they're small, need at least one staff member per resident, probably more, given that this looks like deluxe. This looks like a little building sitting in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I think what part of the investment criteria was that the new owner had to provide 2 full-time jobs. The chef and the hotel staff live in the old farm buildings away from the site. So that reinforces that idea of isolation, that the guests are just there. The hotel employees leave it at night, and you are left by yourself in the middle of this vast valley.
Yeah, maybe similarly related to some of the questions Aaron raised, but in this case maybe a bit more material oriented is the weathering of the roof. I think that's, and you showed it quite beautifully in the photographs, that fits so powerfully well with the landscape. Did you ever thought about integrating that also a bit more to the interior experience?
The roof developed out of a value management exercise. Before that, we were playing with the idea of fish scales. So this is a late change where we kept the membrane roof with its battens and then just used the spotted gum rain screen on the outside. The same spotted gum is used to make the lamella. They're 90 by 25. There's 3 layers. If you flip back to this, we've kept the same timber, the spotted gum timber, right through the whole building. I'll just try and find the right slide there. This one here, it's the same timber as the outside is on the inside. So it's an Australian plantation grown timber. We don't have strong enough timbers in New Zealand to use.
But maybe, I think he wants to point more the simplicity of the roof. We like, I think, all for these images from outside, but when we are coming inside, the image that you showed last,
Yeah.
I want to see the landscape, but there are so many vertical elements. It came maybe from your engineer or from your architecture, I don't know, I don't feel this. It's somehow...
You mean from inside you can't feel
Yeah,
the outside
when I'm
enough?
there in the main hall of the hotel, so I want to see this nice landscape, but there are so many columns and I don't know, many things. Is it a part of the interior, of the engineering, architecture? I don't know.
Sure. The glass is 1.5 meters wide and quite tall, so we had to deal with 200 kilometers an hour wind load, so they were about as big a module as we could use. So do you feel perhaps the view is cluttered by beautiful architecture?
As you can see, there are outside so many firms, they can make big glasses. So.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
I just had a quick, can I add? Yeah. I mean, when you talk about it as a lodge, so do you see it as a place where you're sitting in and the view is what you're actually engaged with in the landscape? Or is it a place from which people go out to other places?
You can rent the whole farm and bring your family there, or the rooms can be let individually. There's beautiful trout fishing, and it's really that's the refuge you return home to in the evening after you've had your adventure. So it's not really to be that passive, but I think the solitude, people can use the solitude how they wish.
Fancy hiking lodge.
Lovely note to end on. Thank you very much.